All right, folks. Well, hey, thanks everybody for coming out. I'm Evan Abrams. This is Motion Design Hotline, a live program where two dinguses are going to try to answer your After Effects and motion design questions. Again, I'm Evan Abrams, and we're here with Kyle Hamrick. Kyle, tell us a bit about yourself.
There we go. Sorry. Still had YouTube window up.
I know. Close that YouTube window. Don't worry about that window.
Yeah, you were introducing me, right?
I was trying to, and then this natural handoff kind of happened.
See, well, maybe I'm just like breaking the ice by being awkward right off the bat.
That's what it's like if you meet us in person. That's
yeah, pretty much. This is how it'll go. So I'm Kyle Hamrick. I've been doing After Effects-y stuff for about 15 years now. I've been training people mostly in person on it for 7 or 8. Yeah, that's kind of the quick version.
Those are human years, so that's a long time.
Those are human years. Yeah.
Hello, everybody in the chat. If you have questions about these fun time things we're going to get into, let us know in the chat. Kyle's got it open. I've got it open. We can see what's going on. There's a bit of a delay, so by the time we actually talk about the thing you've typed, time will have passed. But that's
your background music is still on, I think.
We got a bunch of cool. Oh no! Let me destroy that music. I'm going to destroy it. Boom! I crushed it. So everybody in the chat, I'm seeing a lot of great people. Oh, Jake in Motion's up in here. We got
oh boy,
Anthony Hairstrubble. But let us know who you are. Let us know where you're from. We'd love to know who's even watching this stuff. We have a live counter of what's going on. But we've already got some great questions coming in. Like what are the most important things to learn when starting to fake 3D animations in AE and After Effects? So these are the types of things we're going to get into. But Kyle, you and I have already come into this thing, with something prepared. We grabbed something out of the mailbag, so because we didn't know people would already have questions. Let's. What do you say we get into that thing we prepared earlier? And
I think that's a good way to start. Yeah.
Sort of unironically, hey, Jessica Libby's in the chat. Unironically, we chose a loading animation because this is the first thing. So also just a heads up that this stream is sponsored by Millinote, and we'll be using that to kind of go through some of our show notes here. It's actually it's a pretty fortuitous way for us to actually arrange our show notes so that we can look at stuff.
It's working well.
That's right. So Kyle, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna pull up our first question of the day. Oh man, we got some people from Portland coming in here. Both Portlands, maybe. All right. So we're going to go to Evan's screen here, and we'll just throw that live. So someone asked in the email, the old school way of people sending things at us, is they were tasked to make a following color wheel into a loading animation. So hopefully you can all see the color wheel over here that's going on. And this is actually... anyone who enjoys museums and textbooks has probably seen this image. It's an old-timey color wheel made with painting. And they were asking, is there a smart way of controlling the brightness of each color object in relation to each other, so I have an easy way of adjusting timing and color and tempo? So that was kind of our starting position. That's what we were jumping in with, right? And... Kyle, you and I both had sort of totally different thoughts about this. You had a bit more of a procedural way to go about it, and then I was taking maybe the most brute force method. I was like, you know what? Let's just make some mats. Who cares? What am I even doing? So Kyle, why don't we go to you first? Because I think yours is going to be the most interesting of the two of ours, and then mine will just be kind of like a big wet blanket that we put over top of everything. So Kyle, we're gonna jump to your screen now.
All right.
So close down all them nasty tabs because you're live.
Yeah. So I take it everyone can see this here. So I've got these pre-baked as well, just in case I forget what I was doing. But so I typically do like to take kind of a more procedural approach when I can. I think Evan's is going to be like, if you need to be 100% exact to the original artwork. Obviously, from the question, we don't really know whether that's the case. I kind of like to build something that's easy to work with and then try to style it to the thing if that's possible. So that's kind of where my head went. I'm going to go ahead and start with a shape layer build first. So I started off, when you're making something round and you want this kind of procedural, like going around the circle-ness to it. That to me said that I should make a rectangular shape layer like this, and then use the polar coordinates effect to get the circular look. So by the way, you can alt-click up here in this little thing, and that will cycle through the different fill types. So I'm going to use just a white to black gradient here on a rectangle that's the size of my comp. It actually made it a little bit bigger somehow. Or I don't know why that's slightly bigger than my comp, but it should still work fine. Then I'm going to go ahead and use the polar coordinates effect here. Go from rectangular to polar. And yeah, because it's slightly, I don't know why I'm off somehow.
Oh, that's interesting.
1920, 1080. And 1920, 1080. Well, that's weird, but I'll just work with it here.
We're going to roll with it. It's live, Kyle.
Yeah. So that gives me kind of the initial proof of concept here, because my thought is then I could apply the colorama effect. Oh, because I've got a stroke on. Ding. There we go. Dinguses indeed, right?
That's right. Well, you know what the coffee mug says. Set expectations low and then meet them.
Yeah, there you go. So here we go. We've got a pretty good thing. I just need to break this up into segments, right? So let's shut those off for a minute. And my thought was that I could make another rectangle here. I'll call this one cutaway. I'll call this one like base gradient, right? So on the cutaway, I'm going to go ahead and kill these things. Let's make this real small, like 20 or something. I'm kind of just ballparking this right now.
Are you're doing a lot of this like all in one shape layer sometimes?
Yeah, that's kind of how I roll. You can fit a ton of stuff into one shape layer if you kind of understand how they work.
Right. Because this is a question we get on the channel a lot, like a lot about the hierarchies of things. Mm-hmm. Why aren't things lining up the way we expect them to? So maybe talk us through kind of how you're organizing stuff in there.
Absolutely. And I think some of this will become a little more clear as I get the rest of it on here. But so I have my base gradient rectangle. That's the full size here. And then I have cutaway here. That's just this one thin little rectangle. I'm kind of just ballparking the size right now. And then I'm going to use a repeater that I got right here from add repeater. And what that does is it makes a bunch of copies. We'll say, I don't know, 30. And then you have an internal transform property for the repeater to kind of decide what you want those to do. Okay. So you see, I'm kind of going across the screen here. I'm just kind of eyeballing it so that it kind of matches going around here. This is probably not enough wedges, but it should be in the ballpark. So then what I want to do is take this cutaway and I want to actually cut that away from my base gradient. So I'm going to put the gradient on top, and then I'm going to use a merge paths operator here. Put that out here in the main part. And then I actually need to pull this gradient fill out here as well, because a merge paths will kind of steal away any of the internal fills that you have. And then I'm going to set this merge paths to subtract. So it's subtracting the cutaway shapes from my overall one. If I change my background color to something brighter, you can kind of see what's going on there. So this was kind of my theory for building the, if I take this back to polar coordinates, you can see I've got my wedges there. Ooh. And then colorama will get that there. So that's a good like procedural shape. And now by messing with the cutaway, I could say, well, you know, maybe I want this more like 12. And then I could mess around with the repeater, make more of those, kind of make them closer together. Just kind of play with this until you get the exact layout that you want, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a couple different ways that you could kind of interpret the question this person's asking. For me...
Yeah, and I mean, on that point, I would say there are many ways that we try to interpret like client work.
Right, sure. A lot of times you're kind of figuring out like, how do you need the thing to move? And that may determine how you need to build it. So, you know, you could go real simple with something like a radial wipe effect, and you could wipe the thing on and off like this.
Sure.
You could wipe it on. You could make a duplicate radial wipe that is kind of following up and doing the opposite of this thing. You got a lot of options there. You could whatever. You could make a duplicate version of this thing without the radial wipe at like a lower opacity. That's so you're highlighting portions. It kind of depends on what you need to show here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe that's not quite the look you're going for, or you want a little bit more specific control. You could also kind of duplicate this cutaway shape again. Maybe put that down here, kill this repeater, and then you could use another duplicate of the merge paths so that you are, let's see, this would be an intersect now.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. And so that this one kind of controls the visibility of what you've got here. And then you'd actually use this position, this horizontal position, to be pushing that through.
Right, which is great because that was part of their question, right? They need to easily control sort of how wide the band is and then where the band is.
So I feel like if you need to be like mathematically perfect with this, shape layers would be the way to go, because you can get everything pretty pixel perfect, and you have a lot of opportunities to link everything up into kind of a rig here, right? So my other idea, those of you that have seen my stuff before know that I love text layers. And so I figured you could probably do a very similar thing with a text layer.
Absolutely. And in fact, Andrew's already got some follow-up questions about your experiments. So,
oh yeah, I bet. I've been totally ignoring the questions for the moment while I'm doing
That's fine, baby. I'm here. Yeah. I'm here to take the things out of the chat. I take them out of there. I put them in our Milanote, and then we're going to get back to them later. So if anybody in the chat is like, they're going to miss my question, hey,
yeah,
I got you.
We'll look at it.
That's what I'm here for.
So my thought on that, and one thing to point out is with the shape layer build, I was able to get, where did I go here? I was able to get that kind of pinched look here.
Right.
But with the text layers, maybe this will be a kind of a more straight line situation. So I made a bunch of these. These are just like the vertical slash. I'm not sure what that character is called.
Yeah. Anyone who knows, please tell us in the chat what that vertical slash thing is called.
Then I'm going to make a circular mask on the layer here, just with the masking tool. And you can apply your text layer to that path. Ding. Now you can see it's going around the path. And then I'm going to do a very similar idea here. Let's set the text to be white. Okay. And then if I create an animator for fill color brightness, we'll set the brightness to -100. It's going to affect everything right now. But if I open up the range selector and set that to either ramp up or ramp down, see, I've got a little bit of overlap here. I just need to tweak, kind of eyeball this so that the things land in the right spot. There we go. Let me reverse that because I think that's kind of backwards from what I wanted. There we go. And then if I apply Colorama again, you see we're kind of back at the same look.
Yeah.
And the way text animators work, now I have a lot of like per character abilities that I could do.
Right. You could make these bigger, smaller, rotated, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
This is getting us a lot closer to sort of the kind of things you can do in Cinema 4D, which is, we're not going to talk about that a lot, but to have an array of things that happens to be in a circle, and then you can manipulate segments of that going around, which is, I must say, your experiments, your month of experiments. If people haven't seen it, they should go to kylehamrick.com, and people can find some of it there. I think that's easier than going back in time. Jake in Motion tells us that that little bit of typography is called the vertical bar, but then Tree has corrected him that it's called a pipe. So.
And I think I've heard pipe before, so I'll go with
fight.
So while you were chatting, I'll just point out what I did here. I created another animator for scale, and I just to something that we could kind of see here.
Right.
And then if you play around with the range selector a bit, you can just kind of isolate some of the characters, maybe use the offset to push that around. This would be something to explore to see exactly what look you're going for, but hopefully
just explore the space,
Yeah.
And you could even use, I would assume you'd probably use opacity if we want to get like,
Mm-hmm.
because their kind of brief was talking about brightness. So if we wanted to use opacity, we could even have kind of a gradiated ramp up, ramp down situation with the many forms of text animator range selector we have.
Exactly. A lot of options here.
Yeah, yeah. Not to break your flow, but
No.
you know.
I didn't know how far down this rabbit hole you wanted me to go.
We're gonna keep going, man. Keep it going. I'll interrupt you. I've already decided we're not showing my version.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of riffing here. Like on this thing, it's very much, decide what you want it to be and then go with that. The thing I like about these is that you can keep adding characters or adding. Well, that's sort of weird. You can keep adding like properties to this,
Yeah,
and decide what you want it to do. But then you can kind of just keep tweaking with the one set of keyframes that you would have here. So if you decide you want them to kind of fly out, or you could even go crazy here and enable per character 3D, and then they could be like flying out, way out at us this way. You can't really see it since I'm scrubbing too fast here, but with opacity coming down, like these could get thrown way up in your face here.
What?
Whatever craziness you want to do here.
Don't throw those in my face.
Whoa.
And like this is good not only for loading screens. This is good for your fake UI, your FUI stuff. Like for some reason, everything's always loading in science fiction space. I don't know why their load times are so terrible, but these sorts of elements are great to throw in. One thing that I wanted to kind of bring up before we move on to our next segment is hold on, I'm just gonna now let's leave it on whatever you're doing. Is loading animations really have three phases, right? We have the loading bar has to show up, and then it has to cycle in some ways, and then it has to go away, right? So those are kind of your three phases to think about if you're making or faking a loading bar. Maybe you're using this for an app, maybe you're using this for something else. But the main thing is that it needs to come to town, do a thing, leave town. And you need to think about how you're going to transition between these three kind of distinct phases. And it might even be that it never goes away. It's loaded and now we're in the app, so who cares? Or it could be that it just suddenly shows up. But you really want to think about these three distinct phases of the animation as kind of discrete chunks and how we're going to get from one to the other. So that's kind of that was really the only useful spiel I had. I just used mats on a layer, so that's not really anything to write home about. So
it depends on who's home.
That's true. That's the old standby. So yeah, we've used up almost a third of our time here, Kyle. So we're gonna jump back to the two shot here real quick. Now everyone can probably see both of our faces. So stop making weird faces. This is the part of the program where
Sorry.
You got some schmutz on you there. You want to just pick that out of your beard. So this is the part of the program where I let everybody know that this live stream and this whole season of live streaming, we're going to be doing 13 episodes of this, taking us, actually, we're going to be doing like 15 episodes. We're going to be going right up to the new year. So every Friday, we're going to be doing this. And so if you missed today, don't worry about that because, we're going to be doing it every week. And all this stuff is going to be archived. So if you're coming in late, if you've missed this stuff, then just know that this stuff is going to be around. And this whole season has been brought to us by Milanote. So Milanote is a pre-production app. It's the thing that I'm using to collect everybody's thoughts during the animation. I can see Kyle's cursor moving around. But before we move into the real Q&A section, we're just going to quickly play a little thing from Milanote so you all kind of know what that's all about. So I'm also trying to produce this thing at the same time, so I'm just going to press a bunch of buttons. See you all after the break. Okay, now it should be back to us, I think. That seems correct.
Looks like it.
Yeah, so that was our ad from Millinote. Hopefully you guys check that out. It is an app that we actually use. But since we talked about the sponsor, Kyle, you're kind of the guest on the program. Why don't you talk about things that you're doing and let people know, where can people find more information about you? Where can they hear you talk live? Where can they buy that shirt you're wearing?
Yeah, so I do have my next speaking engagement will be at the Keyframes Conference, which if you have my screen here,
I don't.
it's up right
now
here.
I have to go to your screen again.
Keyframesconference.com, which will be in Boston, November 15th through 17th. So if you're in that area or want to be in that area, be there. I also there are some other speakers who are probably much more interesting than I on here. One of whom is in the room, Tracy, I saw earlier. For some reason, my internet's being quite slow right there. Let's see. Chris Doe will be there. Mikey, Ian, Louisa. I mean, like, there's a ton of, oh yeah, that guy, huh? I mean, like, there's a lot of very knowledgeable people here. A bunch of people from Forest Effects, and then they're still listing a few from the Orlando one as well. But I enjoy conferences like this, and if you do or think you might, then you should go to it. Check it out.
Awesome.
If you want one of these silly T-shirts, they're on my Gumroad, gumroad.com, Galasaurus Rex. I've got these. I am about to launch a ladies' cut shirt for those of you that don't like the unisex cut. I'm testing those out right now.
Are you testing them out with your body? How are you testing these?
Not with my own body, but with a few other people's bodies. So,
well, there you go. So we're going to, we're here at the third of the way through. So it's time to start actually answering people's live questions. We got to do what we promised to do on the Tin Man. So let's get into it. Let's see here. We're going to crack open the Evan screen experience here, where I've been collecting things that people have said. So right off the jump, I know we've talked a little bit about these wonderful ideas here that your tech experiments brought up. So, question for Kyle. This is from Andrew. Checking out your tech experiments, and they're talking about the calligraphy example.
Oh boy!
And they'd like to know a little bit more about that without getting too crazy. What do you say we jump on a little bit of that calligraphy example?
Yeah, sure. I can give the base idea pretty quickly here. Okay. Actually,
we're going back to Kyle's screen.
I'll say that the meat of it is just kind of brute forcing it. That's a good example of where a lot of these things are just kind of eyeballing things, and so that's kind of just doing it. I am going to start with this one little tip here that you will probably really like, though, which is not in there. So I'm going to make just one character. The whole thing is just based on a line of periods. And rather than having to eyeball how many of those I'm going to need, I'm going to create this little expression here in my source text. If you create an expression by alt-clicking, and then at the end you type .repeat, and then in those parentheses you could put a number right there, or you could pick with that to a slider that now gives you a slider that can kind of control the length of your thing. So now I'll go ahead and let's just quickly make a path. Oh boy, that's rough. There we go. We'll say that's my amazing letter form here.
No, that's an L, right? I think that's a cursive L.
Ooh, or some approximation of it.
I don't even know if they teach cursive in school, so I can't tell you.
I think they do. I don't know. My son's getting to right about that age. I'll find out soon.
I write entirely in caps, so there's no confusion.
So I'm going to condense my tracking. Again, I'm kind of just eyeballing a lot of this. Probably will reverse that so it starts at the top. And then let's just kind of crank this out until it's the right length. So, I mean, there's the general build is you just wrap it around a path. And then I would probably create an animator for either opacity or, scale or something so that you can kind of write it on that way. But then the tapering is a whole bunch of just clunky figuring it out. think I would have created an animator for scale, and we'll call this taper. Let's take that to say 20, but we don't want everything scaled down. So what you'd use is a whole bunch of range selectors here. So I would maybe set this to ramp up and like, I don't know, maybe make this like 20, and then I'd make another range selector that kind of picks up after that and goes from like 15 to 30 or something. Like it's a whole bunch of futzing around with range selectors to kind of get in and out and in and out and in and out and in and out. You can download the project file of this and kind of see what that is, but it's probably 20 range selectors that I kind of just eyeballed until they looked right.
Well, yeah. And that's, so what's interesting about this is you can use this to just write on the thing as you've done, right? I mean, you could gussy this up because it's just a layer. So you could drop some rough and edges on there. You could,
exactly.
You could make this look real nice. You could also just use this to reveal another layer. You could use this as a matte. You could use this to, maybe you've got some calligraphy that's maybe a bit more nuanced or interesting that's been drawn either in Illustrator with fancy brush strokes. This will get you closer in those little corners where the overlap happens. So hopefully that can get people sort of where they want to be, which is great. Boop, 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 boop. Good. So let's go back to the two-shot here while we discuss our next question, Kyle. We're trying to alternate between kind of hard questions and soft questions. You know, we want to kind of bounce back and forth. Well, we've got a couple in here that are asking about. So Steve Ramirez and Andrew's back in the mix again. Both of them are kind of asking about, tutorial sites, inspiration. So Steve's asking, there are plenty of tutorials and go-to sites for inspiration and refreshers. Are there any that we can recommend? He says that some are shady. I don't know many shady tutorial sites myself. EvanAbrams.com is, of course, the shadiest website you could ever go to. Do not, But Kyle, we know that we've been talking about you're making some tutorials and that kind of thing. But I guess the question is, where do we go? We people who output thoughts, where do we look for our inspiration? And then Andrew's asking about what are our thoughts on creative prompts? Do we use them when we're feeling stuck? So creativity is rough, and this is something that I kind of struggle with and talk about a bit. I don't know where you fall on this spectrum, Kyle. This is where Evan and Kyle are going to debate the nature of creativity in front of you. I look at everything as a process, right? I think about, we're going to work the process, we're going to arrive at the solution. I try to frame most creative things as a problem. We have goals, we have objectives. How do we get there? Who are we getting there for? This is because I'm what you would call a non-artist. I'm not super artistic. Because on the flip side, there is just kind of absorbing things, and stuff is going to matriculate. Something's gonna happen in your noodle. The muse is going to strike you, and something's gonna happen, right? So if you fill your head with all this inspirational stuff, then it'll bounce around, and something beautiful will fall out. Is not sort of where I'm at. I do not subscribe to this. I'm certainly keen on curating taste. I think that's important when we're looking for inspiration, or we're looking for things on a taste level. There are many places to go. And on the other side, there are many places to go for things on a technical level, right? So where are you at with this kind of thing, Kyle?
Well, I think you and I fall largely in the same area of the spectrum.
So we can't have a fight on the live TV?
I mean, we can fight. Harry suggested that the way our name titles are on the promo kind of makes it look like we're going to have a throwdown. So maybe we need to here. I need to.
That's right.
I tend to be a more technical person as well. And lately, especially, I've been trying to work with people that are a little more design focused, so that they can worry about that, and I can worry about making it move, and like making fancy rigs and stuff like that. But I agree. Sometimes like that initial spark is where I struggle. I tend to be good at, if someone else sort of has the initial seeds, then I can take that and figure out like, here are the logistics to make that work for within this context. I think viewing it as sort of like a problem to be solved is probably kind of how my brain works as well.
Yeah, and in terms of where kind of technical things come from, a lot of the kind of problems that I'm solving, I usually have to talk them out with somebody, if that makes sense. It's the kind of thing where there are various Slacks that you can get involved on where people will help you out with your problems. I'm usually bothering people personally with my problems because it's, at a certain level, your problems become so niche, right? Like most people at a certain level have the same problem. And then the more you solve those problems, the more niche and specific your problems get, as I identified this pyramid shape. So you might have an incredibly specific like expressions problem that, for me, that means that I can't be looking at motion design forums. I have to look at JavaScript and web and math areas. That's where I have to look for those solutions because that's the narrow thing we're going towards. Or sometimes it's a methodology problem where we're trying to green screen something and how do we move the camera and what are we doing? And so we're trying to dial those ideas in. And it starts to get really specific, which is why it's difficult for me to say, well, here's a big reciprocity of things to go to. Finding inspiration is a little bit easier, I think. Finding inspiration is there are many aggregators, there are many Instagrams, there's many Twitters, there's websites where you can go. There's your wine after coffees, your motionographers, your all these places. There's that Stash magazine that I would recommend checking out. But when it comes to inspiration, I would actually recommend kind of getting outside of motion design. And I think this is a trend that I think a lot of people have talked about, where the idea is if you keep looking at where you are or the field you're in, you're going to be looking backwards and at things that are replicating styles or dominant themes are being suffused, right? Whereas if you're thinking about how do I create original ideas, then you would probably want to be looking for inspiration elsewhere to see where that comes from. Maybe it comes from nature. Maybe it comes from other hobbies or interests. Maybe it comes from looking at different decades or movements of design and art. So maybe that's where you go. But ultimately, though, for me, a lot of this, again, it comes back to problem solving, that the client has asked for a certain thing or a certain vibe to reach a certain audience. We research into that audience, and then we start to figure out where we're going. So that's kind of where that comes in. I don't know if that was helpful, but maybe.
Well, I'll say yes, because that's very similar to the answer I think I would have given. So
Kyle, I'm glad that we can at least agree with each other that we're both geniuses, and we'll just congratulate each other for our excellent answers. And that's kind of where we're at. You've entered into the agreement zone with Evan and Kyle, where we just agree with each other for a little while.
But also, everything you said is wrong and stupid and terrible.
Oh, that's true. Well, Kyle, I hate your opinions, and I hate you. So,
well, that's fair.
This is the internet, Kyle. So, if we can't bicker about our minor differences, what are we even doing here? So, let's go to the board. Let's grab another question. Let's see what's up in the pool. And granted, we're probably not going to get to every question, because we're halfway through this thing, Kyle. I did not anticipate our time very well. Really beefed that one. But people are asking about what do we got going on here? We've got
tips
this.
Smooth. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Anything jumping out at you from this list? Like got
tips for really silky smooth motion. There's an easy answer and a more involved answer.
Okay, let's dive in, because this can get pretty broad. We're talking about motion. We're talking about describing motion. Kyle, let's get simple. Let's try to simplify our lives. Okay. You and I are going to simplify our lives. I'm gonna pull open my After Effects here. Yeah. And here's this disgusting thing that I was doing. Look away, everyone.
Yeah. So this question came from Anoop, who looks like is mentoring again. So
yeah. So when we want to talk about motion, let's just real quickly make something. Kyle, you and I can both just make a circle or a square or something that is going to be doing the motions that we want it to do. And whenever we're talking about silky smooth motion or movement in general, I really think that what we need to think about is taking us back to the principles of animation, this idea of anticipation, follow through, making sure that things are easing into and out of their movement. If you want something to feel alive, if you want it to feel like it's moving with intention, we have to start thinking about how we set that up and how the audience is going to react to those ideas. So we've got a circle. Let's just deal with position. Let's only deal with that for now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this thing go from over here to over here. And as you can see, that is bad. This is terrible. I've done the worst. I apologize for this. But maybe this is where a lot of people start, because these are the default keyframes. We can grab these and we can look at the graph editor. So got to talk about that graph editor, guys. This is where we're going to dial in motion. So right now we're moving linearly from one point to another, and we are moving linearly in time. So meaning that this has the same velocity from here to here. Let's easy ease that. So if we were to easy ease this, and you can do that animation, and then you go down to easy ease like this, or hit F9, or he's got these cool buttons over here. But what that means is that now this is the type of motion that's being described, that it's going from here over there like that. So it has the most acceleration in the middle. Generally, you would want to skew that a little bit, that it's getting... And we have to start thinking about what is propelling this thing. Why is it moving in the way it's going? You know, what is initiating this movement? So, boom, now it's getting like a kick. Something's coming along and punting it at this point. Something's getting a big boost. You can even drag these handles, and it's important, because I get this question a lot in tutorials here, that... Why does my graph editor not look like yours? Well, it's because maybe you're looking at a value rather than a speed graph. So the value graph would look like this, whereas the speed graph would look like this. And we can look at the reference graph to have both of them up like this. And let's just zoom in here so we can see what's up. So now it's like this thing is being hit. Pow! And then it's drifting into space. So that's another way of describing this motion, that something is happening and there it goes. Now, generally, I would say that you actually would like, if this is getting really punted, you really just want that highest point of acceleration right here. So it doesn't necessarily have to be happening back here where it's hidden. You could set it here. And this is just one kind of motion that we're only going in a straight line. Really, to make things feel correct and good, what this should be doing is not moving in a straight line at all. It should be moving in an arc or a curve, right? So you can grab your little Bezier situation up here. This is the Convert Vertex tool. And if you've got your motion paths out there, I don't know if you guys can even see this path. People were saying that, this terrible, this 720p nonsense here is not good. So it might not be super apparent where this line is at. So maybe the resolution is bad, but I'm going to take this and I'm going to try to turn it into more of a curve so that it's going to dip down and then up. Woo! It's dipping down and up. And
the sound effects are essential, by the way.
Woo! Slide whistle, saxophone. The idea here is that we are now describing a little bit of that anticipation move, that this thing is going to go down and up. Patooey. But you can take this even further, right? That we could say that first this thing needs to come up a little bit and then it's going to go down. So we can try to describe that. So let's just take these. And if you need to look at their interpolation, you can call it open. And you can get this keyframe interpolation by right-clicking and then pulling that up. And you can change this to linear, spatial, as you like. So now we're going up, down, and away. So that's something to think about as well, that maybe you want to set this up to go in a different way. And a lot of this is going to come down to some personal kind of choices that you have to make, that you're going to have to decide how this stuff is going to happen. And that's a lot of the subjective decision making that makes you an animator. That how you're going to describe these curves and these motion, these choices are the things that you're going to do. So those two principles that we're talking about are, well, three, I guess. Arcs, making things ease in, so easing in as they start and as they stop. And then finally, this idea of anticipation is kind of what we're into, that the eye is drawn to the thing and then it goes, and now we're attending to it. But Kyle, you guys can't see Kyle's screen, but I can see Kyle's screen whenever he's touching things, and he's been doing some stuff. So let's go over to Kyle's screen and see what he's been doing.
Okay. Yeah, I just made a quick little comparison here. This first one is just a linear keyframe. Number 2 is easy eased. And then this third one, I did some manual stuff on here. You see the third one has a little bit of anticipation and a little bit of follow through here, which really kind of amps things up. And it has a much steeper curve. If you can see both of these, you can see this is that steeper one, and how much of a difference that is between the easy ease, and then I can show you just the linear one as well. Boop, boop, boop. Can I make that all like super big, kind of?
And just to reiterate, is this a speed graph, Kyle, or is this a value graph?
I am currently looking at the value graph, which I prefer right now.
Flip.
Yep. I will say that obviously our quick description kind of gives you the rough answer on this. If you want to dive deep into learning about why you would make these choices and when to make them, I have to say that the School of Motion Animation Bootcamp course, which a couple people have already mentioned in here, and I think we have a couple of TAs for that course in our chat here, that would really probably be the way to go, to just really, really throw yourself into it.
Yeah, there's people dedicate a lot of time into studying motion. Why is a thing doing this? What does that mean? It's really like the fourth dimension, right? That we're able to make a thing move and to imbue it with life. That's if there are any traditional animators in there, please don't punch me. But it's that idea that we're going to take this thing that is lifeless, we're going to give it life. How something moves tells us, is this an evil character, or is this an evil text layer, or should we be feeling something about this? And you can do that with motion. That I'm not sure you've seen like the IBM kind of animation where they talk about their specific curves of motion that mean something, that one means organic and the other one means human. And I think that's really telling that they've thought about not only their colors and their shapes, but also their motion, that when things move in a human way, it looks like this. When things move in a mechanical way, it looks like this. So those are things to sort of understand about any large piece you're making is, does this character always move eased? And is this one always staccato? And what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway. Any more thoughts on silky smooth motion, Kyle? What else? I see you've got flow open there.
I do. I was going to call that out in a second if it felt appropriate. This
or I can just inorganically prompt you to do those things.
Well, that works either way. So obviously, like knowing why and when to make these movement choices is important. But there are certainly times where the After Effects graph editor may not always be the easiest solution. There are a couple of third-party scripts or extensions that you can use to work with your motion curves a little bit more easily. I personally really like Flow, which is an extension. You can get this on AE scripts. And it, like, here, let me just show you. So here's my linear one. I can just choose a curve that I want, maybe like this one here, and just apply it. You can have it apply as a curve, or you can have it apply as an expression if you wanted to. And then maybe you tweak this manually. The way that I tend to use it a lot is actually, if I have one thing that I've already really massaged the curve and gotten like really perfectly happy, you can pull that and then apply that to other things. So you can kind of line everything up and make things move together. So I'm a big fan of this tool. This isn't my usual workspace, but it definitely has a home in my everyday workspace here.
That's right, folks. Kyle has a lot of things cluttering up his desktop, and Evan has decided to hide all of that stuff under the table so you can't see it. That's the other big difference between Kyle and Evan. Just so people don't think we're the same person. I mean, I've heard our voices next to each other. We actually sound pretty similar. I'll be honest. So, Kyle, let's go back to the board and see if we can find some more cool stuff in there. What else have we got? Because we've got another 15 minutes before we have to go and do important things.
I saw a quick one that kind of dovetails off of what we were just doing.
Okay, what do you got?
So who asked that? Someone, sorry, I missed who it was talking about doing smoothness in the text animator stuff.
Okay.
So I'll just point out real quick.
Kyle, I gotta go back to your screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
The short answer is that you should probably watch the School of Motion tutorial I did on the text animators, because the beginning of that will kind of explain how these bits work a little bit more. But the ease high and ease low are what you're going to probably want to look at there. Figuring out the kind of the intersection of the different shape things, the way the shapes work.
The things.
High, ease low is kind of the secret there. See if I can give a real quick demonstration of kind of how that's working. I don't want to dive too deep into the text animator stuff today necessarily, but the way that the text animators work is they're kind of pushing the change through the line of text here. And so I just thought, let me get rid of that, kind of trying to strip away some of this stuff. The range selector is defining which portion of it is being affected. Let me give this a nice round number. And then the shape is the way that it gets pushed through that. And then ease high and ease low is kind of like the graph editor for the way that these changes are being applied. So obviously you're not usually doing this with a line of dots, but if you kind of play around in here and get a feel for how those work, that'll kind of help you understand how those are animating the change between one state to another. That's how this works.
And that part can be really confusing for folks, I think, because most of that is invisible, right? Until you start clicking through it. So it doesn't make a lot of intuitive sense, and you really have to get in there and do the things to see how it goes.
Yeah.
There are a couple of questions in here that I want to jump into real quick. So let's see. We've got this one's going to be pushed over. There was one that's from a Nick Abrams. His name is similar to mine, so I think we'll go with that. He's asking when you do a wide scene where the camera's dolly or the camera dollies from left to right, so we're going across the thing here. Do you just create a super wide comp and then move a camera through it? If that even makes sense. ... So Nick, when we're talking about moving things in a 3D scene, there's a lot of ways we can do it. And the first thing I want to talk about is making sure you use the correct camera words. Where's my camera? Is it here? Use the correct camera words. I think dolly is actually correct in this situation. But you can truck. You can... Yes, there we go. Kyle will demonstrate for you as I say the word.
Sort of. I'm not moving the camera, so
that's right. We can't do that. I'm not going to move my monitor around for this, but you can also pan, which is I'm doing it now. I'm the camera. I'm panning. So there are all these different ways that you can move the camera and simulate moving the camera, right? And one of the interesting things in After Effects is because it's a 2.5D environment, we can actually just move a camera. So let's go to Evan's screen and let's talk about cameras, right? Cameras. So what we could always do is take a little pen tool here. I'm a mountain, so I've made this cool mountain range, sure. And
it's beautiful.
I know, right? It's a little bit abstract, just kind of playing around with this stuff. So we've got this cool mountain, and we'll say that this is the deep background, right? And they were talking about should the comp itself be super wide, right? And what are we going to do here? Well, let's do that and see what happens, right? We go to our comp settings and we just go ahead and make this super wide. So we're at like a square here. We'll just crank this crap up. We'll just go big, right? So now we've made a thing that is super wide. Good for us. And we could plop a whole bunch of things in here. So let's do 3 layers of this thing. Let's do a background. So everything back here is going to be on the deep background. Everything up here is going to be on the foreground, and everything in here is going to be in the middle distance, right? And so if we wanted to do this in 3 dimensions, we would probably want to actually make these things 3-dimensional, sure. And then we can bring the thing that's in the foreground towards us, right? And we can observe this not through the active camera, which is nothing, but through this custom view where we can kind of enjoy looking at it. So we can just push these things around. If I call up their positions, you can see where these are relative to each other based on this information. So then we've got this going down, which is nice. So they're at these different levels. They're like if we were going to build this out of cardboard, say, and that's kind of the best way to...
That's what you can do in here.
Yeah, I know. You can build a lot of these cool things out of cardboard. And now we can...
Cards in space.
Yeah, cardboard in space. Hey, that's our new our program. It's cardboard in space. It's pretty cool. So back here on our deep background, what I'm going to do, I just need to have more of this, right? So I'm going to add a repeater on here, and I'm just going to repeat out, I don't know, man, like 10 of these. I'm just trying to go pretty quickly here. And, you know, we've now got all these cool mountains that are back there. So let's make this a little bit darker, let's say, because it's far away from us. And there it is. So that's our backmost thing. Now our frontmost thing, our 4 thing, let's make that a little bit lighter so that we can actually tell what's going on with that. Okay. So we can kind of differentiate them from each other. And, you know, we might as well just kind of repeat the same process, right? We kind of want these to be, at least we can kind of tell the difference between them. So I'm just going to stretch this out. Whoa, look at that. Cool mountain. And then finally up here, we're going to take this path and we're going to do the same thing. So it's going to go like that. So, I'm going to flip it around. Now I'm feeling very artistic. Okay. So if we were to just put a camera in this scene, we go new camera, and let's make this, I don't know, 24 millimeter, cool. And now if I just take this camera, right, and I call up its position, and I just start scrubbing this thing from left to right, you know, that's doing the thing. It's moving from left to right, and the foreground and background elements are behaving the way we want them to. If we went to go and export this scene, that wouldn't be super great because now we're exporting something that is super big. But we could just as easily take this whole scene and we just go here, composition settings, and just, you know, 1920 by 1080. It doesn't really matter, right? The size of the composition doesn't have a huge impact on what's happening here, right? Because the same thing is happening. We're just looking at it through this little window. The only real difference is that we can't really access and organize this stuff over here and over there. So that's where having a wider comp is actually going to help you out in this sense. Mm-hmm. If you wanted to start faking things, though, if you wanted to make a giant comp for just your deep background, you would want a big wide thing, right? You need a nice large wide composition because that's what's going to happen. And you don't necessarily have to move a camera. You could keep all of this 2-dimensionally, and you just move the background layer kind of slowly and the foreground layer kind of quickly, and that would get us to what we're talking about, that this parallax is happening. But again, this main comp doesn't need to be big. It can be this size. And we're just pushing layers through a comp that is this size. I don't know, Kyle, what are your thoughts on this kind of conundrum?
No, I think if I'm doing 3D, I will tend to make like a build comp where I can see everything.
Yeah.
And then it depends a little on how complex it is. But a lot of times I may take something like what you did and have a big wide comp so that I can see where everything's at, and then just drop that into a render comp that's actually the export size. And I'll typically probably make myself some guide layers or something so that I can kind of see what my visible region's going to be. But that way I'm not constantly having to like try to see things that are outside the canvas. It really just sort of depends on the complexity of what you're setting up. But there's certainly no harm in having pre-comps. I try to avoid pre-comps a lot of times now, unnecessarily at least. But that's a great use case for them, is give yourself all the room you need to work and see things and set things up. And then just drop that into another one for the actual export, if that's what works.
Yeah, I guess what's interesting is that oftentimes we're getting pretty literal in stuff. Like, I'm going to export something at HD or 4K or whatever. You don't have to work in that. You can work in whatever, right? What you end up spitting out at the end,
up to 30,000 pixels.
Right. It could be anything. Like, we have the freedom to make comps whatever size we want. It doesn't matter, and it ultimately, when we get down to what you're outputting, that's where you have to care about that. And everything else could be about framing or about frame size and where it's at. But in general, it doesn't really matter. It's all virtual space, right? And when you hit that collapse transformation button, there it is anyway, right? Because we could build this whole 3D scene if we want to, right? We could build this all in a comp, and then we move that into something else. We hit collapse transformation, then it all just explodes out. There it is in the 3D space. All this hand waving is to say 3D. This means 3D space, just so you know. Whoa, Kyle, you're doing too much parallax. We didn't distribute the 3D glasses. People are going to throw up. We can't do that. Anyway, we're coming into the final minutes of the program here. So this is where we are going to, or at least I am going to look back in here. I'm going to see if there's anything we can smash out pretty quick. Jessica Libby was asking about some creative ways to use master properties besides the obvious. She's talking about using it for character animation, and it gave her some thoughts and some ideas there. And I think, I remember we were in Vegas going up and doing that talk, and I think we both had the idea to talk about character rigging using master properties, which is pretty interesting. Like, you can set it up to reveal layers or to hide layers, for example. And you can, just as an idea, maybe some of the layers are like angry face or happy face, or like various mouth shapes, we would say. Like, you could have those phonemic mouth shapes. Those are they. If you want to use those, just take them out of this. But then you can take those ideas and see what's up, and you can just tab between them. So that's kind of the idea there.
Yeah. I think my quick addition to that would be master properties are a deep topic, and we could easily devote like multiple episodes just to those. I'll just say, if you're not using master properties, start using them.
If you're not using them,
like at a most basic level, if you've ever had to keep clicking back and forth between two comps because you're tweaking one thing inside that pre-comp that needs to line up with something, feed that property to the essential graphics panel, and now you can reveal that as a master property in the other comp. You don't have to go back and forth. The thing that's really amazing about them is that they are iterations of that pre-comp. Right. So you can make one pre-comp and then make several versions of it with different options. And that's like revolutionary.
Yeah, the idea of instances, which is something that we deal with in Cinema 4D all the time. This is an instance referencing something else. And even though we're changing it, the original is still there. Nothing has changed. We've changed this weird ghost thing. Everything is fine. So it's definitely something that if you're not currently using it, if you're intimidated by it, it just takes a little bit of time, get in there and see what's up. And it can be very rewarding to try to get through. Speaking of things that are rewarding to get through, Kyle, we've done it. We did our first hour of live stuff. We did it. We didn't get to all the questions that we wanted to today, because there were a lot of great ones, and we will definitely be getting to more next week, because we're doing this again next week. We're doing it every week, except for the weeks where for some reason it's impossible to do due to various things. Things such as, Kyle, I heard you were talking in Boston. Someone told me that earlier today.
Well,
Kyle, what do you got going on? What do you want to plug? What do you want to tell us about while we're still here?
I don't know. I mean, I plugged Keyframes. I plugged my silly shirts.
Yeah, tell people about the shirts again. Some people might have only shown up halfway through. We don't know.
Oh boy, yeah, okay.
That's how live TV works, Kyle. You have to keep reiterating the same things to people.
Oh, I know. Well, if you want one of these silly shirts that I'm wearing here, whoa, like
do me a solid.
I have a couple other After Effects nerdy specific shirts. You can find them on gumroad.com/Kylosaurus Rex. That's on my Twitter as well, and my website, kylehamrick.com.
That's where we can find all your tour dates, where you're going to be touring. Because you're also going out to Blend, is that correct?
I will be at Blend just as an attendee. So those of you that are going to Blend, which I know several people in the chat will be there, I'm looking forward to it. So that should be a good time.
One of the other differences between Evan and Kyle is that Evan does not leave his house.
Well, if that were true, we would not have met at NAB.
That's true. And that was, I was getting out of my comfort zone. So, but Vancouver is a beautiful city. If you are going to Blend, tag on an extra few days and get out and see the environment. If you like it there, why don't you just drop by the local immigration office and stick around? Enjoy the incredible housing market, which is just abysmal for anyone who wants to live. But it's one of the most beautiful cities in Canada. It's one of the most diverse and interesting places to go. The architecture is amazing. Just the natural environment. You go half an hour north of the city, you are in the Canadian rainforest up there. It is beautiful. Get on out to the island, hop a ferry, go to Victoria, hop another ferry and go to Tofino if you like to surf. So that's my kind of thing there. The other thing we need to talk about is that this episode in the series is brought to you by Millinote. Millinote, whose video I apparently did a very bad job of making play earlier today. So oopsie doodle on that. But very sorry about that, sponsor of the program, Millinote. But Millinote is a thing that we've been using to organize the show. If you want to check out the archived streams of this, if you want to see all of our show notes and how the sausage gets made, there's going to be additional notes and that kind of thing in the Millinote boards that we share down here, and hopefully that works out. And Kyle, I just want to say thanks for agreeing to come on this journey with me and doing this stuff live together, reaching across borders, getting to know people. We had a bunch of people on the stream, and thank you all for coming and for sharing this time with us, sharing your lunchtime or your breakfast time or your dinner time, whatever time it is for you. And that was great. Anything you want to say before we hit the big old button and blow this thing up?
I don't know. Obviously, I recognize a lot of the names in the chat. That's great. Good to see all you guys. Good to see anyone who I didn't know already. And looking forward to, hopefully seeing you guys in future weeks. And hopefully this was interesting enough that you want to keep coming back.
And if it wasn't, let us know and we'll do something else. All right. Thanks again, everybody. And we'll see y'all next week. Bye for now, and we'll see you around the internet.